Hello, hello, everybody, and a happy Thursday. 2 days before I go on my vacation, and I'm doing my best to try and get as much information out for people as possible. I've been taking notes, copious notes about things I want to share. Mila is out and about. She'll probably join us later. She's having some kitty kibble right now, but she saw me put the iPhone on record, so she knows what we're doing. She's a very smart kitty, and she'll probably want to join us in just a bit. Okay, so I've been doing a lot of meditations around the idea of the environment. People have asked me to do that, and it's actually been pretty cool, some of the meditations that I've been doing. It's a little bit complicated, what I've been picking up, so I'm going to try and explain it as best I can. Hello, Mila. How are you? Why don't you come over here? Okay, so I did a meditation on the earth, on Gaia, last night. And the interesting thing about the meditation was that as I meditated on Gaia, as I meditated on the earth, I began to see how the earth was a living organism. It was as if the whole entire earth was a living organism. And very aware that just as the earth is a living, conscious organism, and that we are parts of the living earth, I began to think about it in terms of how we categorize parts of the body in healthcare. We might have the immune system. In medicine, we organize the body with a systems approach. So we have the immune system, we have the digestive system, we have the central and peripheral nervous system. That was kind of how my meditation presented the world, that the world is a living being, and there are different systems that allow this being to exist. And humans are interconnected with Gaia's immune system, so to speak, in the sense that we can either help strengthen the earth, strengthen her immune system, or we run the risk of being parasites to the system. And a parasite is something that feeds on the host and eventually depletes the nutrients of the host. It takes the nutrients for itself, it gives nothing back, and that's basically a parasite. And if the parasite takes over, then the health becomes compromised and the host may die. So it was interesting to meditate and see human beings from that perspective. The simple fact that the earth is a living organism and that we are part of this complex ecosystem, and that we have a function in this complex ecosystem to enhance and support biodiversity, to protect and maintain the earth, to enlarge the earth, to work with the earth to strengthen its immune system, protect its biodiversity, and to co-create with the earth an expanded world, an expanded and healthy world. It's kind of funny that I did a meditation a couple months ago where I asked to see what the future earth would look like if we did everything right, if we worked in concert with Gaia, if we worked alongside her with an understanding that she comes first, what would the earth look like? And I saw these wonderful floating cities, and it's kind of exciting because Sir Richard Branson is now funding a future city that'll be orbiting the moon, and he said it'll probably take us about 50 years to have a colony. And I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. That's what I saw was these floating colonies that the earth and its bounty would expand beyond just our simple understanding of the earth. So it's kind of nice that those visionaries are doing that sort of thing. Hello, Mila. I knew she would eventually show up. Yes, your position will be right here. Thank you. Yes. All right, so we expand the earth, we expand her goodness, and we spread her goodness outward. Another exciting thing that started to happen is long-term care in cruises. Yes, cruise lines that offer 12-month-a-year, 6-month-a-year cruises, which is kind of like the early prototype of the floating city. So I was looking at some of these cruise lines. Some of them go on for 6 months. The most interesting cruise I found, some of these run $40,000 to $80,000. But if you're retired and you're still healthy and you're living on, say, $80,000 a year and all your needs are being met, and there's a clinic on the boat, then theoretically you could be on a different cruise every 6 months. You just change the cruises. So one of the world cruises, I think it's starting at $20,000 for 6 months, which is reasonable for many people. Starts in Miami. And from Miami it goes to Europe, then from the Europe it goes to the Middle East, then Asia, then Africa. So you basically stay on the boat and you get to tour and see the world, and it's a great way to retire. So I think it's probably the cruise lines that are going to be the first, and that's actually seems to be what's happening, creating these large floating cities. And it's a wonderful solution if you are retired and you don't want to be tossed aside or have some kind of sad retirement. It would be better and more affordable to simply join these long-term cruise lines that they're starting for seniors and simply see the world. So that is definitely what's starting to happen there, and it's exciting that we were able to do that remote for everybody. So in terms of Gaia and what Gaia needs for us, if we perceive of it as a living organism, then there are things that we can do in order to strengthen the health of this organism, with an understanding that we are a conscious part of that organism that's making free choices. So some of the things that can disturb the organism are drilling, digging, agriculture, exile, pouring things into the watershed, not cleaning up our messes, not cleaning up the plastic. It's not really all that metaphysical, the solutions. The solutions are based on a concept called the three kindnesses. And the three kindnesses can be practiced by anybody, regardless of your religion, regardless of whether you have no religion. And it's basically a contract or agreement between human beings that we will agree to these three kindnesses, whether we are Buddhist, Christian, atheist, agnostic, etc. And this is basically the contract that we have with one another and with the planet, these three kindnesses. So the first kindness was care for the earth and an understanding that the earth comes first. So the earth comes first because ultimately it's one organism, and if that organism becomes sick or dies or suffers a serious health crisis, all of the systems will eventually shut down, and that includes the immune system or the part of this ecosystem that human beings are responsible for. We're responsible for adaptation, helping the earth to evolve and adapt, biodiversity, but also protecting the earth. So if we don't understand our role in the system, theoretically that puts the earth in a dangerous situation, and ultimately all of us in a dangerous situation. So first comes mother. The mother must come first because the mother gives nourishment to everyone. So what appears to have happened energetically when I meditate on this, is that there's a disconnect that takes place in the earth and a desire to control the earth, rather than an understanding that we are organisms that are a part of something greater than ourselves, that is the earth. And that change happens about 11,000 years ago when we start to get involved in agriculture and we start digging into the earth. We start breaking the soil, and then we evolve into eventually drilling and creating complicated agricultural systems that in many cases have created stress for the planet. The other thing that happened is that it evolved into wars in Mesopotamia, for example, and the birth of religions that were based on centralizing the government and controlling the masses. And so what happened was we had the birth, not just the birth of agriculture, but an escalation of slavery. Slavery existed in gatherer and hunter cultures. I'm an anthropologist. I always like to say gatherer and hunter rather than hunter and gatherer, since 90% of food foraging was plant-based. But anyway, so there's documented cases of slavery in gatherer and hunter societies, but we really see it escalating with agriculture, and that's because agriculture was hard work. Working in the rice paddies was hard work, and they needed compliant people. So in Babylon and in Asia, where we're seeing early agriculture, we see the birth of centralized nation states. The power becomes centralized, and then a need to control people so that everybody does their job to maintain this system. And with that came the slavery mentality. And the slavery mentality was a religious belief that's function was to keep slaves obedient and submissive. The only way to run a Babylon successfully is to impregnate in the slaves the idea that they deserve it, that they asked for it, that it's their fault because of previous sins from lifetimes that they can't remember. And so now you're all slaves, and you have to be obedient slaves and do what the gods and the leaders who have been appointed by the gods tell you what to do. And if you don't obey the slave master, you will incarnate into a horrible life. And so therefore, you must do exactly what we tell you to do and be an obedient slave. And it worked out really well for thousands of years. People didn't break away from slavery because they believed there was an invisible God that was watching them at all times, making sure they did their work properly. And people were easily exploited, and bad people, the sociopaths, the psychopaths, the monsters of the world got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and people became more and more apathetic, allowing it to happen because they felt it was the karma of the victims to suffer. And so this belief system ensured generations of slavery, generations of victim bashing, and it polluted many beautiful religions, including Buddhism. Then Buddhism goes through a revolution, which eventually gives birth to what we call modern Buddhism, where it breaks the shackles of feudalism. And we now see cultures like Tibet, which broke away from feudalism, trying to return back to some of the beautiful mysticism of Tibetan culture, the shamanism and the Buddhist principles, but being very clear that they also have to examine how feudalism dramatically impacted the beliefs of how Buddhism was expressed in Tibet and victim bashing. So that brings us back to last night's remote. And last night's remote was really about connecting back to this organism called Mother Earth that we've slowly become disconnected from. We've become slowly disconnected through agriculture by trying to subdue and control the earth to get her to do what we want rather than what she needs. This has led to soil erosion, chemicals in the food supply, as we take like parasites with no understanding that the ecosystem has to be replenished and we have to protect the ecosystem. And so Gaia, the planet, has to protect herself from this type of attack. And so she produces things like viruses, floods, storms, etc. So the areas that are most vulnerable, to be specific, are the southeastern United States. It looks like, particularly in August, we're going to be having hot weather in the southeastern United States, and we're going to be having unusually high humidity, and that makes it vulnerable for serious hurricanes. So I'm worried about the southeastern United States, South Carolina, North Carolina, Florida. The other thing that I saw last night was Arctic chill moving into areas of the United States that had never been that cold before. Potentially extremely cold weather in the northern United States, New Jersey, etc., could see a record Antarctic chill moving in over this winter. So The three kindnesses. So what are the three kindnesses? Number one, first, be kind to the earth. If you're starting a new business, if you are starting a new project, you would approach it from the perspective that all actions we take, all businesses we run, all activities we're engaged in we must first ask ourselves, does this protect the planet? Does this help the planet? Does this nurture the planet? Does this expand the planet? So when you start a business, part of the mission statement has to include the environmental impact. Number one, we care for the planet, we expand the planet, we support the planet, and we don't engage in any activities that theoretically would harm the planet when we're engaged in our business. An example of that would be you go shopping, you decide you want to be plant-based, you want to be vegan because it's gentler to the planet, but then you end up buying prepackaged vegan meals that are wrapped in plastic and single-use plastic, which ends up being dumped into the watershed. And so even though theoretically you might feel great about yourself that you bought the tub of hummus in the single-use plastic container, but ultimately it's having a really dramatic negative impact on the earth. So the better environmental choice would be to buy things in bulk and just make it yourself, or to appeal to companies to start producing products with biodegradable packaging. The second kindness is how you treat yourself, how I treat myself, and to not put ourselves in harm's way. Because the earth comes first, and because the first principle is that the earth comes first, that means that if she brings a flood to the southeastern United States, hurricanes, etc., and factory farms wind up underwater, which seems to be where we're headed. She's taken out a lot of factory farms in South Carolina, North Carolina, and probably will again. So we're going to see a lot of factory farms in Texas, factory farms in Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina being hit hard, Georgia hit hard, and that's because they produce a lot of methane gas, and so the natural order being what it is, that will create heat, and when it's combined with moisture, there will be flooding, and so the factory farms will flood. And again, that's just Gaia's immune system. And so for the person who's running a business that's not friendly to the environment, it's not going to end well. And then the third kindness is how we treat others, that ultimately how the golden rule, that how we treat others is a reflection of how we treat ourselves. And like Oprah Winfrey says, you can't give what you don't already possess. So those are the three kindnesses. She comes first, Mother Earth, and that extends also to our own treatment of mothers. Last on that, in addition to agriculture making us disconnected from Mother Earth, I also saw people are not breastfeeding their children, so they're getting disconnected from the mother love that way. I know, for example, the current head of our government, of our executive branch, he was never breastfed. He doesn't like breastfeeding. He says it's disgusting. None of his children were breastfed. I think actually his last child, there was conflict because Melania breastfed. So that's another example of being disconnected. All right, so I want to just do a throw about what is going to be happening in the Senate this week, because I'm also concerned about the Senate. When I go into the meditation on the Senate, I always hear from Lindsey Graham and also from McConnell that it's all about the courts. And I know that yesterday they started pushing through a lot of court appointments. So it feels to me like what they're trying to do is give this president time. They're stalling and stalling and stalling so that they can get all of these court appointments in case this president has to be removed. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and take a quick look at the Senate. What is going to go on with the Senate? Ace card. I keep seeing the same thing over and over again, even though it doesn't look like that publicly. They will leave this administration and they will build a new alliance elsewhere. I don't see loyalty, despite the fact that this president is popular in the Republican Party. There's fraying happening, and it comes over and over and over again in the Eshkak records that this is not a stable relationship between the Senate and this president. And I think it's because of growing dissent from independent voters. The union, lovers, the relationship, crossing Four of Pentacles, which is the frugality card. So I just don't feel a love affair between the Republican Senate and this president, despite the public displays. It's really more, it's just all about the courts. It's all about the courts. They are now openly defying the Congress. And there's a new investigation that's going to be opening up. The FBI is opening up a new investigation with this administration. It was started by Nancy Pelosi. It appears to be regarding the Treasury and missing funds, and it's a very serious accusation. And we're going to be hearing more about this investigation into thievery of the Treasury and some kind of filing that was made. There's another serious criminal investigation going up that is not the Mueller investigation. It has to do with missing funds from the Treasury. That's the best way for me to interpret it. Okay, everyone, so that is today's tarot and remote viewing. Gosh, what a complicated remote viewing about Gaia and what she needs from us. You know, it's something interesting to think about. Times when we choose to be parasitic, take and don't return, whether it's take and don't give anything back to the earth, or also, you know, do we take advantage of the people that we love and care about? You know, how are we contributing to the planet overall? It's interesting. Another great thing that we can do, in addition to simply being mindful of not polluting and our own destructive habits as far as the earth is concerned, is we can also volunteer, donate to conservation programs and conservation organizations, and be part of the change we want to see in the world, as Gandhi said. All right, thanks for watching, everyone. If you're trying to get in for phone readings, I have a couple tomorrow that are opening, and that is the last openings I have for the week, and then I will be back in 2 weeks after I do my vacation to, yay, Italy and Greece. I will take plenty of pictures so everybody can see it. All right, thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye.